Welcome to the Self-Made Math, where we work to solve the problem of innumeracy here on the Coalition Radio Network. I'm Rich Southwell, and this is episode 7 of the Self-Made Math. Tonight we are going to talk about mayhem in the nickel markets and how that might be impacting that nickel trade that we talked about way back at the end of January before any of this broke down. And we're also going to talk about my other favorite thing in the world, which is breakfast cereal, and how some of the world events going on right now might impact the price of your breakfast going forward, and what you might be able to do now to take some of the bite out of that. And yeah, that was a pun, and it was a bad one at that. But before we do that, as always, thanks to Pat Ford and the Coalition Radio Network for giving me a platform to talk about things that I think matter and provide some examples of how math, which a lot of people take for granted or avoid at all costs, is actually a part of our everyday life. And as you can see tonight, I am wearing merch because we are trying to support the coalition. A couple different ways you can do that. You can share links to my content or other content that you enjoy with friends and make sure that they are hitting that red subscribe button. You can go to the merch center, get yourself all geared up for spring and summer. It'll be time for short sleeve t-shirts before you know it. I've got a coffee mug on the way, so I'll be featuring that in a future episode as soon as it arrives. Who knows, with the supply chain and $5 diesel, it'll get here eventually, I'm sure, and we can all look forward to that. So with those things out of the way, let's talk about the nickel trade. Now, if you've been watching this show, or if you've gone back and watched episode 2 of this show, I talked about this crazy idea that that 5-cent coin in your pocket, the Jefferson nickel, might actually be worth more than that because of the meltdown value of the metal that it's made of. And it's made of 75% copper, 25% nickel. Amaze your friends with the term cupro-nickel alloy. Sounds very impressive. Just means they mix two metals and they happen to be copper and nickel. But as the prices of those metals have increased, so too has the cost of producing that 5-cent coin. And in that original January episode, we determined that it was about 6.5 cents worth of metal in that 5-cent coin, and that at some point in the future, the Treasury of the United States might decide that it wants to make nickels out of something besides nickel in order to save on costs. They did it with the copper penny back in 1983. They changed it over to mostly zinc. And we speculated that that could be a possibility for the nickel at some point in the future. And so I thought that would be kind of the last that we would talk about it. Maybe we would look at metal prices every once in a while as a gauge, for inflation, or to see how metal prices were doing relative to inflation. But it was kind of a quick thing that we would check in on. And then we had mayhem in the nickel markets in the last few days. And so I pulled up some charts, and we'll pull those up right now with a quick screen share. And so this is a 30-day chart for the price of nickel, the spot price of nickel, what you would pay for it on the spot, hence the name spot price. And going back to early February, we got the time horizon on the x-axis across the bottom there. It was moving up at a pretty good clip. If you look at the space between $10 and $15, it was about $11 when we started in early Feb, and it's getting up to about $13.50 or so last Friday. So it was moving and it was increasing, and the rate of increase was getting steeper. So the increases were getting larger, and then this happened over the last 3 days. And so at the bottom, we've got Friday's close of $13 and about 69 cents. Those decimals matter when you're working in millions, but not so much for what we're talking about here. This is per pound. They shot up yesterday to $21.97, so almost $22, and then they fell back a little bit today to $17.30. So just looking at that first move from Friday to Monday, 60% in one day. This thing's moving like crypto. Keyshawn prefers crypto. I like things I can drop on my foot. But let's face it, crypto is generally a lot more exciting. But for one day anyway, nickel, the most basic of metals, important for batteries, was moving like crypto, which is to say straight up. And then the next day it went straight down, not straight down, but took a lot of that spike off. But just looking at the change from Friday, if we kind of ignore Monday's action and just look at Friday to this morning, you're still up 26% in 2 trading sessions. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. I don't know that this is going to necessarily resolve itself quickly. There's a lot going on here. So we'll look at this first spike first. Monday was the first day after the weekend. And then when you've got something as large and complicated and dangerous as the Ukraine going on, you're always a little bit nervous when things shut down on Friday because you just don't know what's going to happen over the weekend. And so what people came to grips with over the weekend was that it was likely that the Russians would continue to be shut out of the global economy. So there was talk of not purchasing Russian oil or gas or other commodities, trying to really isolate and shut down their economy to get them to withdraw from Ukraine. And so when people started looking around, they noticed that the largest nickel producer just so happened to be a Russian company. And so when everybody went into work on Monday, the price of nickel shot up, because if we're not buying from the Russians, then that means there's a lot less supply on the market. And so prices are going to go up. And as I said, it's especially an important metal right now because it's a critical component of many of the batteries that are going into things like electric vehicles. So that was Monday's action. And then things got really squirrely overnight from last night to this morning. There was some sort of, I still haven't gotten to the bottom of it, but there was some sort of derivatives blow up on the futures market. The London market closed early. They canceled a bunch of trades. But when things settled out, we were at that $17.32 mark, and we'll just have to see what happens tomorrow. Things will maybe come down closer to the $13 mark or $13.70. Maybe they'll stay where they are. We just don't know. But anytime you hear about somebody having a large margin call on a significant derivatives position that went the wrong way, you just never know what's going to pop up in the headlines the next morning. So that's being sorted out now. And, we'll wake up tomorrow morning. It'll be like Christmas. We can pick up the paper and see what went on. And maybe we'll talk about it next week if it was significant. So using today's close as a price, just to see where what our nickel would be worth on a Meltdown basis today. I've got this kind of tracker that I've been keeping, and I don't update it daily. I'm not that obsessed with the price of nickel or hoarding nickel coins. But every once in a while, I like to go back and see, do a quick look back and see how things look relative to that January 18th episode where we did this episode 2. And I can tell you the copper has been moving up a little bit. I think we started, it was maybe 420, 430. So it's gone up a little bit. The nickel price, as you can see, per pound is reflecting what I saw this morning is the close. And if we go down to this bottom line here, the total line, we see that the total Meltdown value based on the mix, 75% copper, 25% nickel. We do a weighted average on that 5-cent coin in your, at the bottom of your sock drawer is now worth 8.6 cents. So significantly more than it was in January, the middle of January, which is about 6.5 cents. And, we're up 33% since we first looked at it back in January. Like I said, we'll take potentially another look at this next week if things move around a lot or see if the story changes at all. But I suspect there'll be more wild movements while they're trying to figure out what to do with that poor individual or firm that was looking the wrong way when they made their derivatives order, and see if they're still in business, see how big the damage was. So we'll pop out of this right now, but something to keep an eye on. You might even see it in the more mainstream stuff. I mean, I don't, people certainly hear about gold prices, oil prices, dollar exchange rates, relative to the euro and the yen. Nickel does not come up frequently in conversation, but this week you might actually hear something about it. So with that, we'll tuck this away, get out of the screen share here, and we will go back to talking about tonight's other topic, the one that I had originally planned for tonight before Nickel Mayhem broke out. and that is the topic of breakfast cereal. Now, breakfast cereal, one of my favorite things. Breakfast is my favorite meal of the day, and I do love cereal. And if you've ever been on my YouTube channel, where I do shorter bits for students, you'll know that I work with breakfast cereal quite a bit to use examples of unit pricing and couponing and all manner of other things. It's just a great medium to work in, and it's also delicious. So what we're seeing right now is food inflation. I don't think this comes as a surprise to anyone. Price of food was going up at the grocery store before the Russians invaded Ukraine. That has only made things accelerate, and I would argue make things potentially a lot worse in the near to midterm in terms of what we might be paying for certain food staples. So looking at breakfast cereal, we think about grains, we think about wheat, we think about oats, we think about corn, rice, depending on your favorite type. And we know that supplies have been a little bit tight anyway. And if you've been to the grocery store, you may have noticed that, pre-pandemic, you could go into the cereal aisle and they would have the shelves stacked 6 or 7 or 8 deep, all the way to the back with boxes of cereal. And now many times you go in there, depending on the variety, and they're 2 deep, they're 3 deep. They might be out of varieties altogether. So supply's been short for a while. And then when we look at late winter, early spring, which is where we find ourselves now on the calendar, and start thinking about planting for next year and what's going on in Ukraine, it just so happens that the Ukraine is a major wheat exporter. It's the breadbasket of one of the breadbaskets of Europe. So they've got a window of time coming up when they're going to be able to plant a crop, unless they are not able to plant that crop. And if they aren't able to plant that crop, then a lot of supply is going to come out of the market. Now, Ukraine doesn't necessarily export much, if anything, to the United States, but they do export a lot to Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. And so if that comes off the market because it wasn't planted, the price of the wheat that is planted is going to go up, up, up. And we've already been seeing that in some of those same commodity markets that we were looking at for nickel. So the price moves have started already, but everybody's hoping that will level out or maybe even come down if the Ukrainians are able to settle things down with the Russians and get a crop in the ground. But we'll see. What will happen, I think, in this country is marginal acres. So acres that farmers wouldn't ordinarily want to plant because the yields aren't great, and it may cost them more to plant and work some of those fields or some of that acreage. If prices go high enough, it's actually worth the while to plant. So they might be able to replace some of the lost production from Ukraine and get that out onto the global market, but it's unlikely that all of it's going to be able to be replaced. And so supply is going to come down. Demand is not going to change. People tend to be pretty demand inelastic when it comes to food. You have to eat 3 times a day or 2 times a day, depending on your regimen. But people need to eat, and so the people who will be hurt the most by this are impoverished countries, developing nations, in Africa, in Asia, and then people on the lower rungs of the economic ladder here in the United States, because prices are going to go up and people simply have to pay them or go without food, which is not a great option. So advice on this, or thoughts about, okay, so how do we get rid of this, this demand issue? Like I said, hope that things calm down in the Ukraine and they get a crop in the ground. The other complicating factor here for food prices in the United States is that in addition to nickel that we're not buying from the Russians, we're also not buying oil or gas from the Russians. And there are a lot of countries that are going to follow suit on that. And that is driving energy prices way, way up. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody who's taken a drive and gone to a gas station in the last couple of days. We saw gas go up from $3.97 a gallon here in Rhode Island to $4.19 overnight, just based on the possibility that some of those imports wouldn't be coming and there'd be a supply constraint on oil. Now that based on the headlines I'm reading today, that seems to have happened, And so some of that supply is going to come out in the market, and that's going to push gas prices up, and that's going to push diesel prices up. And when diesel prices go up, it costs more for a farmer to run their tractor, costs more for a delivery truck to come and collect the harvest, transport it to a processing facility, and get it onto your store shelves. So that is also, that production cost increase is also going to find its way into the breakfast cereal prices and many food prices. But since we're talking about breakfast cereal, many of those prices here in the US. So what can we do to blunt that? In the short term, the prices are already high. I expect them to go higher. My own personal strategy has been to try and buy more when I can find a good deal. And I'll highlight just a couple of things that I'm seeing in the market and some things that I've done recently by bringing in some visual aids. And so the first one, I actually profiled this on my YouTube channel in a video called Cheerios and iced tea. Why are we talking about iced tea? Because he's on the back. This is part of the promotion that Cheerios did at the Super Bowl, and iced tea is helping us to get our exercise. He calls it getting his dance on, but exercise and get heart healthy. So there's a big promotion going on with here. And what that meant was that I was able to get a box of Cheerios for $1.88. And that $1.88 was a big attention grabber. $1.88, less than $2 for a box of cereal, great times. But then I picked up the box and it wasn't really that big. It's this is the 8.9 ounce box. So being the self-made math, of course, I pulled out my calculator and figured out a per ounce price of about 21 cents. So I took the $1.88, divided that by 8.9. I got about a 21 cent price per ounce, which pre-pandemic was high, but not bad. It was in the range of normal. High end of the normal range, but in the normal range. So that was encouraging off the bat. And then I had some coupons, some store coupons from Stop and Shop for General Mills cereals. So I was able to save a couple more dollars if I bought multiple boxes. And I won't spoil the video on self-made math, but I made a bulk purchase of Cheerios, and we'll be getting 2 free snack bowls as part of it. And these are limited edition Cheerios, not just any Cheerios. These are healthy heart-shaped Cheerios, or happy heart-shaped Cheerios. So it was a kind of a 360 win on those. But I was able to buy 7 boxes of them, so almost 4 pounds of Cheerios for what I thought was a pretty reasonable price in this environment, and one I wouldn't expect to see maybe a month, 3 months down the road, and perhaps well into the future, depending on how the upcoming planting season comes. How do I feel about buying 4 pounds of cereal? Well, number one, we eat a lot of cereal in this house. I've got a tween who is starting to sprout up, so he's kind of a voracious eater. I have no concerns about getting through this before they go stale. And I also know that the use by date on these, or the best by date on these, stretches into January of 2023. So we're buying forward. It wasn't a lot of dollars going out. I think it was about $12 or something. So 4 pounds of Cheerios, $12, and they're good until January of 23. So we got about 10 months to go. The other one that I came across was another General Mills cereal, and this is Wheaties. And Wheaties has never been an inexpensive cereal, but Wheaties is made of wheat, and that is one of the biggest exports from Ukraine. One of the grains that's going to be most impacted by a failed crop or an unplanted crop this year. And Wheaties is pretty expensive, generally speaking, anyway. And I was actually seeing $6.29 boxes in Putnam, Connecticut, which is where I usually do my shopping. Probably more information than you need, but it was pretty much untouchable for me. I just couldn't bring myself to pay that much for Wheaties. And so I went without. And then this past week, there was a special where if you bought 3 boxes of Wheaties, they would give you 400 Go points. So 100 Go points will get you $1 off your grocery bill. So that would have been $4 off my bill. Or 100 Go points will also get you 10 cents off of gas. So if you've got a big vehicle and you let it run down to near empty, and you put, say, 15 gallons in, those 100 Go points be worth about $1.50 in gas savings. Now, do I recommend in this environment that you let your gas tank run all the way down to near empty? No, because the prices keep going up. And as we saw over the weekend, they can go from $3.97 to $4.19 overnight. So my dad used to, during the oil embargo in the 70s, when we had gas lines, for years after that, he, every time he saw a good price on gas, he could have 7/8 of a tank full. And just, he would go in and buy 40 cents of gas just to top it off because he saw a good price. And that's how people got conditioned. So that's kind of the approach that I've been taking with gas. I'm trying to stay more full than less, just because prices could spike at any moment. And I've got an SUV, so that could get costly. The other interesting thing about the Wheaties, so you're getting, $4, you buy $3, buy 3 boxes rather, get $4. The store's going to give you $4. And then again, I had coupons for General Mills cereal, which has caused me to give them the new nickname, no longer General Mills, but because they give so many great coupons, Generous Mills. I don't think I actually made that up because they pay a good dividend. I think that's a Wall Street name for them. But the couponing has been great. I don't expect it to last. So I was, trying to grab as many of those, if I can find them, I'll grab as many coupons for cereal as I can. The other interesting thing, I went to a Stop and Shop, which is where I do my shopping in Putnam, Connecticut, the reason I brought it up, but they only had 3 boxes. And I had more coupons that I could use on a subsequent purchase. And so I went to a store in Rhode Island, a Stop and Shop store in Rhode Island, and was shocked to find out that the same box of cereal, same size, was only $5.49, and they had it in relatively good supply. So not necessarily a full shelf, but a pretty good size shelf. And this kind of brought up a memory of 2008 when we had the great financial crisis. And I found myself going to probably 4 or 5 different grocery stores for different things because, it was a sort of a strange time. It was something of a recession, and some places meat was very, very expensive. And other places it was very, very inexpensive. And it was, Purdue chicken, Purdue whole chicken one place, Purdue whole chicken another place. And, might be 30% difference per pound in terms of price. And, cereals in one place would be, habitually high in one place and low in the other. And I just found myself scattering my shopping among a bunch of different stores because I knew that certain things were cheaper certain places and things weren't going great at that point. So it made sense to save as much money as possible. And what I also noticed, and then, a period of time, things got better, and then pricing kind of leveled out, and, stores were all within, 10 cents of each other on most things, whether it was, breakfast cereal, coffee, all the things that, I live on, breakfast cereal and coffee. And what I'm starting to suspect now with supply chain disruptions, different inventory levels at different stores, different sourcing, wherever, some places are getting, meat from a national chains, national meat packing companies. And then others are, buying more their meats locally from local providers. And that's starting to show up in the pricing as well, because if you're buying something from Hormel or one of the big meatpacking plants, it's being shipped in from far away. Whereas if you're buying a chicken locally, Purdue's a good one too, right? Wherever they're doing that out in Indiana or down in the Southeast, those are being trucked up in refrigerated trucks, with that $5 diesel, or I'm not even sure what it's at today, but it was at least $5 over the weekend. And, if you're buying your poultry locally raised, then, that transportation cost is out, and transportation is not an insignificant input cost, for some of these things. So all of that is to say that it probably is going to make sense going forward for me anyway, being the self-made math and the nerd, the grocery nerd that I am, to start going to more stores and paying more attention to who does what or who offers what at the best price, because I think you're going to start to see there's a potential to start to see more pricing differences than we're used to seeing. It was all almost a commodity. I mean, a can of coffee costs what it costs no matter where you went. And I suspect that that's going to start to change a little bit until things settle down. So, of course, the trade-off for that is that you're driving to more places and therefore burning more gas. And 429 or wherever it's settled today, that's a cost as well. So, check the circulars before you go out. Try and have a plan, and then hope for the best, and that the plan can actually be executed when you get there. Because if the store shelves don't have your Wheaties, or they don't have enough boxes of Wheaties, then you can't get your deal. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. And like I said, the biggest thing that I've got my eye on right now is planting season in the Ukraine, and starting to hear from U.S. farmers about how much of that they can replace with marginal, additional planting, on marginal acreage that isn't as productive as their best stuff. So that is what we're keeping our fingers crossed for. Less food is never a good thing. It leads to higher prices and hungry people. So we don't ever want to see that. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope this thing settles down, and that the Russians have the good sense to at least stay away from the agricultural areas in the Ukraine. So with that, we will wrap it up. As always, like I said, please, visit other sites or other links on the Coalition Radio Network. Pat has put up some really great live time, as it happens, coverage of some of these school committee meetings. You would think, well, gosh, it's a school committee meeting. How interesting could that possibly be? And some of them are absolutely fascinating, particularly when you get to the public comment. So you don't necessarily have to understand the nuances of a particular policy in a particular district, but a lot of the themes are the same from school committee to school committee. And so watching that and listening to what other parents are saying and how different school committees are reacting is fascinating. I watched the Barrington one the other night, and I thought, let me just see how this is going. And an hour later, I'd watched the whole thing and was found myself picking my jaw off the floor a couple times with some of the exchanges that went on there. So definitely check out some of the other links. Share those links. Please subscribe if you're so moved and are in need of T-shirts or other merchandise. Go out and check out what we've got on offer at the merch site. And as far as this show is concerned, please, if you've got questions, comments, what is happening to that poor plant over my shoulder there, leave me a question, a comment, and we can definitely work it into a future episode. So until next week in the next episode, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.